The Galactic Council had never rescinded a consequence protocol not once in 4,000 cycles. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more HFY stories. The chamber hung suspended in the void between three stars, a diplomatic monument to unity that had endured longer than some civilizations. Crystalline walls refracted light from distant suns, casting the assembled delegates in shades of amber and ice. High Arbiter Velshara stood at the central podium, her six eyes scanning the semicircle of species representatives with practiced authority. The Zenthar, the Krathic Dominion, the Mulvaran Commonwealth. 47 species in total, their collective power capable of reshaping star systems. Today they face something unprecedented. See, the human vessel has crossed the outer demarcation line. Valara announced, her voice resonating through the neural translators embedded in every delegate's consciousness. Sector 447 Theta. They were warned 3 times, they did not retreat. A ripple of concern moved through the assembly. Not fear, never fear. The council did not fear, but there was unease. Councillor Drath of the Zenthar Empire leaned forward, his scaled crest flaring with agitation. The humans, the isolated ones from the Rim territories. Correct. Velshara pulled up a holographic display. A single ship, unremarkable in design, hung in 3-dimensional space above them. Survey vessel classification unknown. They claimed to be conducting research in restricted space. Research. The word dripped with contempt from Drath's translator. They test us, as all primitive species do when they first encounter true power. Shara's primary eyes narrowed. The humans had been cataloged 70 cycles ago, a species barely beyond their own star system, isolated on the galactic rim, technologically inferior by every measurable standard. They had submitted the required documentation for council observation status. They had been polite, differential even, and now they had violated the most fundamental law of council space. The question before us, Velshara continued, is whether to activate Consequence Protocol 7. Silence. Protocol 7 had been deployed 42 times in council history. 42 times the targeted species had immediately withdrawn, apologized, and submitted to council authority. Such the protocol was elegant in its design. A systematic escalation of consequences, so severe, so comprehensive that no rational species could accept them. Economic isolation, military blockade, technological embargo, the complete severing of a civilization from galactic society. It had never failed. Perhaps they simply don't understand, offered Counselor Mariseth, her melodic voice carrying a note of diplomatic hope. The Mulvaran were known for their optimism. The humans are young, they may not grasp the severity. They were warned in 17 languages, including their own primary dialect. Velar interrupted. They acknowledged each warning and they proceeded anyway. Drath's crest flared brighter. Then they are fools or arrogant. Either way, the solution is clear. Activate the protocol as show them what happens when children play in the territories of empires. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. The council had maintained peace for millennia through one simple principle: overwhelming predictable consequences. Species learned quickly that the cost of defiance was simply too high. Velshara accessed the protocol interface, her neural implants connecting directly to the council's vast bureaucratic network. Very well, I am initiating Consequence Protocol 7 targeted at the human species and their territorial claims. Stage 1 economic warning. The display shifted, showing trade routes, resource networks, diplomatic channels. With a thought, Velshara began sealing them one by one. Every council species would receive the directive simultaneously. See all commerce with humanity. No resources, no technology, no communication. Stage 1 active, she announced. Human vessel is being transmitted. The consequences of their continued presence. Standard projection. They will withdraw within the hour. The council settled into their seats waiting. This was familiar routine even. A young species would learn what every other species had learned. That fear of consequences was the foundation of galactic order. But as the minutes stretched, Velshara felt something she rarely experienced. Doubt. The human ship wasn't moving. 15 minutes elapsed, reported sensor coordinator Theva, his compound eyes reflecting the data streams flowing across his station. The human vessel has acknowledged our transmission and their trajectory unchanged. Drath's crest dimmed to a puzzled shade. They received the warning confirmed. They sent a response packet. It's Theexa paused, his mandibles clicking with confusion. It's approximately 400,000 data lines, mathematical notations, economic models, some kind of analysis. Velar's 6 eyes fixed on the display. In 4,000 cycles, no species had ever responded to Stage 1 with anything except compliance or pleas for mercy. The humans had sent them a spreadsheet. Proceed to Stage 2. Veller ordered, keeping her voice steady. Military posturing. Deploy the third border fleet to their position. Show them what they face if they do not retreat. Across 3 star systems, Council warships powered their drives. 200 vessels, each capable of glassing a planet, began converging on Sector 447 Theta. The display above the Council chamber updated in real time, showing the fleet's overwhelming presence. Materializing around the single small human ship. Still, it did not move. And somewhere in the back of Vaylor's mind, beneath 4,000 cycles of certainty, a small voice whispered something she had never considered before. What if they weren't afraid the third border fleet arrived in a formation designed for psychological impact? 200 warships arranged in a perfect sphere, their weapon systems powered but not locked, their hulls reflecting the light of Sector 447 Theta's dying star. Fleet Commander Zarvok watched from his flagship's bridge as the human vessel sat in the center of their formation, utterly dwarfed. It looked almost pitiful. Sensor sweep complete, his tactical officer reported. Human vessel measures 47 meters. Single hull configuration. Asterisk power output consistent with basic fusion drive. No visible weapon systems. No weapons. Zarvok's spines flattened against his skull in confusion. They entered restricted space in an unarmed survey ship, apparently so. Commander Zarvok had commanded border fleets for 30 cycles. He had faced down pirate armadas, roguing AI constructs, and territorial disputes between militant species. He had never encountered something this illogical. Species that violated Council space came in warships, or at least armed transports. They came ready to fight or to flee. The humans had come in a research vessel. Transmit Stage 2 warning, he ordered. Full fleet power signature. Show them what they face. The transmission went out. A detailed catalog of the fleet capabilities projected casualty rates and the timeline for their ship's destruction if they did not immediately withdraw. The message was designed to be comprehensive, undeniable. 200 warships, 4,000 crew weapons capable of reducing their vessel to its constituent atoms in 0.3 seconds. The human response arrived 7 minutes later. Commander, his communications officer's voice carried an edge of bewilderment. They've sent another data packet. It's larger than the first by a factor of 10. What kind of data? Tactical projections, sir. Fleet formation analysis. Probability matrices for engagement scenarios. And the officer paused, his translator struggling with what it was processing. They've calculated our fuel consumption rates, optimal firing solutions, and estimated response time for Council reinforcements. Zarvok's blood ran cold. They analyzed our fleet in 7 minutes, sir. Yes, that's impossible. Our formations are classified. Our capabilities are, they didn't guess, Commander. They measured spectroscopic analysis of our drive emissions, gravitational displacement calculations, heat signature profiling. The officer looked up, his eyes wide. They've reverse engineered our entire tactical doctrine from passive observation. For the first time in his career, Zarvok felt something that might have been uncertainty. He had expected fear. He had expected pleas for mercy or defiant last transmissions. Instead, the humans had sent them homework. What else is in that packet? A note, sir? Plain text. It reads, "We acknowledge the consequences. Calculations attached." In the Council chamber, Ovalshara watched the same data scroll across her displays. The human ship remained stationary, surrounded by overwhelming force. And yet something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong. Stage 2 has failed, Drath announced, his voice sharp with anger. Deploy Stage 3 economic isolation. Sever every trade agreement with human territories. Cut them off completely. Vaylor executed the command across the galaxy. Diplomatic channels closed. Trade routes dissolved. The few Council species who had maintained marginal contact with humanity received absolute directives. No commerce, no communication, no cooperation. The economic models were clear. A species isolated from galactic trade could not survive. Their technology would stagnate. Their economy would collapse. Within 10 cycles, they would be begging for readmission on any terms the Council offered. The human response arrived within the hour. This time it was transmitted directly to every Council member's personal interface. Velshara's neural implant chimed with an incoming file marked Economic Impact Assessment, Isolation Scenario 3A. She opened it, her 6 eyes widened. The humans had modeled the entire galactic economy, every trade route, every resource dependency, every economic relationship between the Council's 47 species. And they had calculated with disturbing precision what would happen when humanity was removed from the network. Impossible, she whispered. But the math was there. The humans had been trading with the Council for less than 5 cycles. Yet they had already become embedded in 17 critical supply chains. Rare earth elements from their rim territories, biological compounds from their agricultural worlds, technological patents they had quietly filed and licensed. The report showed consequences the Council hadn't considered. The Mulver medical shortage that would begin in 6 months. The Cray-Thick industrial bottleneck that would cascade into manufacturing delays. The Zenthar energy crisis that would emerge within 2 cycles. They knew, Velshara said aloud. They knew we would isolate them, and they positioned themselves strategically to make it hurt. It's a bluff, Drath snarled. They're trying to. It's not a bluff. Counselor Mariseth's voice was quiet, almost odd. Look at subsection 47. They've listed every alternative supplier for every resource they provide. They've calculated how long it would take us to establish new trade routes. They've even, she paused, her expression shifting to something like fear. They've estimated the political instability that will result from the shortages. Which governments will face internal pressure, which alliances will strain. The chamber fell silent, board the human vessel. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the compact bridge, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Around her, 3 analysts worked in quiet concentration, their displays showing real-time updates from the Council's responses. Stage 3 activated, Lieutenant Morrison reported. Economic isolation protocols in effect, just as predicted. Response time, Chen asked. 47 minutes. We estimated 45 to 50. Well, within parameters, Chen nodded. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years running simulations, building economic models, analyzing every available piece of data about Council behavior. The Council operated on a simple principle: overwhelming predictable consequences. The key word was predictable. Transmit the impact assessment, she ordered. Make sure it reaches every Council member personally. Yes, ma'am. Morrison's fingers danced across his console. Should we include the political analysis? Everything. They need to see that we've thought this through. Her executive officer, Commander David Park, looked up from his station. They're going to escalate to Stage 4 military blockade, total territorial containment. Yes, Chen's voice was steady. Estimated time to deployment. Based on fleet positioning and Council bureaucratic patterns, 6 to 8 hours. Then we have time for dinner. Lieutenant Morrison, what's on the menu? Morrison blinked, momentarily thrown by the question. A synth protein curry, ma'am, or the vegetable pasta. I'll take the curry. Commander Park. The same, ma'am. Chen stood stretching slightly. Set condition yellow. Alert me when the blockade fleet begins deployment. Until then, we rest. It's going to be a long few days. As she walked to the small galley, Morrison stared after her, incredulous. Outside the hull, 200 alien warships surrounded them, capable of obliterating their vessel with a thought. The most powerful governmental body in the galaxy had just declared them economic non-entities, and Commander Chen was having curry for dinner. Fleet Commander Zarvok watched the human ship on his displays, trying to understand what he was seeing. The vessel had dimmed its lights. Power consumption had dropped to minimal levels. Life support remained active, but everything else. Are they sleeping? His tactical officer asked. Unknown. Commander, the Council has authorized Stage 4. We're to establish full blockade, nothing in nor out. They want the humans contained until they surrender. Zarvok nodded slowly, but as he began issuing orders, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was following a script the humans had already read. The human vessel had sent one final transmission before powering down. Just 3 words in plain text. See you tomorrow. Not a plea, not a threat, just an appointment. And somehow that was more terrifying than any weapon signature could have been. Stage 4 deployed at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. Velshara watched the holographic display as 900 additional warships materialized around Sector 447 Theta. The 3rd Border Fleet had been reinforced by the 5th, 7th, and 9th Tactical Groups. 1,100 vessels in total, forming a sphere so dense that not even a communications probe could slip through undetected. Full containment achieved, reported Coordinator. Sensor nets active. Interdiction fields online. The human vessel is completely isolated. Any response from them? Velshara asked. They've been silent for 8 hours. High orbiter. Power signatures indicate minimal activity. They appear to be waiting. Doth's crest flared with satisfaction. Finally, they understand. No species can face 0 warships and maintain defiance. They will surrender within hours. But Velshara felt no satisfaction. She had been reviewing the human data packets throughout the night, and what she found disturbed her more with each passing hour. The calculations were flawless. The economic models were sophisticated beyond anything she had seen from a species so young. And underlying everything was a strange, cold precision that reminded her less of diplomacy and more of mathematics. High Arbiter Thexa interrupted her thoughts. The human vessel is powering up. We're receiving a transmission request. Audio only, no ma'am. Full holographic conference. They're requesting direct link to the council chamber. Belcher's 6 eyes narrowed. Granted. Oh, let's hear what they have to say. The crystalline walls of the chamber dimmed, and a human figure materialized at the center of the assembly. Female by their species, Dorfic standards, wearing a dark blue uniform with minimal insignia. Her hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, just too so limited compared to most council species, held an expression that Valara couldn't quite identify. Not fear, not anger, not even concern, just attention. Honored council, the human said, her voice clear and unmodulated by translator interference. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command. I am here to discuss the consequences you have implemented. There is nothing to discuss, Drath snapped. You will withdraw from restricted space immediately, or you will proceed to Stage 5, Chen interrupted. Declaration of hostile intent followed by Stage 6 limited military action, and finally Stage 7 total war protocol. She paused. Yes, we're familiar with the progression. We've studied it extensively. Silence rippled through the chamber. You think you understand council protocol, Belshara asked carefully. Not think, High Arbiter, no. Chen made a gesture, and suddenly the space around her filled with data streams of information, cascading calculations, probability matrices, that spiraled outward in three-dimensional complexity. We've analyzed 4,000 cycles of council enforcement actions, 273 applications of consequence protocol. Success rate 100%. Very impressive. Then you understand the futility. We understand the pattern. Chen said here the council uses fear of consequences to maintain order. It's elegant, really systematic, predictable. She looked directly at Veller. But there's a fundamental assumption embedded in your protocol, an assumption that just failed. And what assumption is that, Velishara asked, though part of her already knew the answer. You assume that species respond to consequences emotionally. That fear is the deterrent. Chen's expression didn't change. Humans don't fear consequences. High Arbiter. We calculate them. Another gesture, and the data streams coalesced into a single massive model. Valer recognized it immediately. It was a projection of the entire galactic political landscape rendered in mathematical precision. This is Scenario Matrix 7, Chen continued. It contains 847 possible conflict paths between humanity and the Council calculated from the moment we entered Sector 4447 Theta. Each scenario accounts for fleet movements, economic variables, political pressures, technological capabilities, and approximately 4,000 other factors. Drath laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. You think you can predict? We don't predict, Counselor. We calculate. Chen pulled up a subsection of the matrix. In 831 of these scenarios, the Council loses completely. Your fleets are destroyed. Your economies collapse, or your political structure fractures under internal pressure. The timelines vary. Some take 2 cycles, others take 20, but the outcome is mathematically certain. Impossible. Drath surged to his feet. We have 0 warships surrounding you. We have 47 species. We control 47 species with competing interests. Chen interrupted, her voice still calm. We've mapped every political fault line in the Council. The Zinthar expansion ambitions that conflict with Movaran territorial claims. The Krathic economic dependence on resources you, Counselor Dracoth, want to monopolize. The 17 minor species who resent their marginalization in council decisions. She pulled up another model, and Velshara watched in growing horror as it displayed her government's internal dynamics with surgical precision. In Scenario 214, we provoke a war that forces the Council to commit its full military. The conflict lasts 14 months. You win technically, but the economic cost fractures your alliance and the Mulverin withdraw. 3 other species follow. Within 2 cycles, the Council loses quorum. Another model scenario, 445. We surrender immediately, accept your terms, and spend the next 10 cycles quietly building economic dependencies you don't notice until we control 17% of your critical infrastructure. Then we renegotiate from a position you can't refuse. Another scenario, 733. We fight, we lose. Humanity is set back 200 cycles. But in the process, we force you to reveal your full military capabilities to each other. The Zenthar see how powerful the CHX truly are. Old rivalries resurface. The peace you've maintained begins to crack. Model after model, scenario after scenario, each one mapped with terrifying precision. In 16 scenarios, the Council achieves what could be termed a victory. Chen continued, but in each case it's pure. You spend more resources than you gain. You create political tensions that take generations to heal. You establish precedents that weaken your authority with other species. She paused. In none of these 16 scenarios does the Council actually benefit from conflict with humanity. Velshara felt something cold settling in her chest. You've calculated your own defeat. We've calculated every defeat and every victory and every outcome in between. Chen's eyes swept across the assembled council members. That's the difference. High Arbiter. You built your peace on the fear of consequences. We built our strategy on the mathematics of consequences. This is madness, Mirith whispered. No species thinks like this. No one reduces war and peace to two equations. No. Chen pulled up one final display. It showed the current situation. 100 council warships, one human vessel, the economic sanctions, the political pressures. Beneath it, numbers cascaded in real time. Right now at this moment, I can tell you exactly what happens next. If you proceed to stage 5, you will declare hostile intent. Your fleet will power weapons. We will transmit the full scenario matrix to every independent observer in the galaxy, the Neutral Trading Consortium, the Independent Worlds Alliance, the 37 species waiting for council membership. She gestured and probability percentages appeared. 67% chance your own member species begin internal debates about the value of war with an unknown opponent. 43% chance at least one species demands negotiation. 92% chance your military costs triple within the first month. 18% chance of council fracture within a year. But if you proceed to stage 6 limited military action, the numbers change. The display shifted. 34% chance we retaliate in ways you don't anticipate. 78% chance other species see your limited action as precedent for their own grievances. 5% chance of galactic-scale conflict within 2 cycles. And stage 7, Belcher asked quietly. The display changed one final time. The numbers were worse, much worse. Total war with humanity gives you a 96% chance of military victory, Chen said on a 200-cycle timeline. At a cost that will bankrupt 40% of your member species and create political instability that our models suggest has a 41% chance of ending the council as a functional governing body. The chamber was silent. You're lying, Death said, but his voice had lost its conviction. These calculations are impossible. No one could. We brought our work, Chen said simply. She gestured, and suddenly every council member's personal interface flooded with data. Every calculation, every source, every assumption, every variable, it's all there. 18,000 pages of mathematical proof. Check it, verify it, run your own simulations. She looked directly at Veller. You wanted us to fear consequences, but fear is an emotion, High Arbiter. And emotions can be overcome by courage, or desperation, or stupidity. Oh, mathematics. However, Chen's expression finally shifted into something that might have been a smile. Mathematics is absolute. You came here knowing we would respond this way, Belcher said slowly. Every threat we made, every protocol we activated was calculated to 97% accuracy, Chen confirmed. You've maintained galactic peace for 4,000 cycles using the same playbook. It was trivial to predict. What took time was calculating the optimal response to each stage. And what response is that? This one. Chen gestured at the surrounding fleet visible through the chamber's crystalline walls. Let you demonstrate your power. Let you commit your forces. Let you realize that we're not afraid of your consequences because we've already done the math on every single one of them. And let you understand that threatening humanity is not a question of moral courage or military strength. She paused and her voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. It's a question of acceptable losses. And High Arbiter, we've calculated exactly what we're willing to lose. Have you the numbers hung in the space between them? My 847 scenarios, 1,100 warships, 4,000 cycles of certainty, crumbling into probability, matrices, and mathematical truth. And in that moment, Veller understood what she was facing. Not a species to be threatened, not an opponent to be intimidated, but something that had looked at the galaxy's most powerful government and reduced it to variables in an equation. Have the council chamber remained frozen for 17 seconds, a silence so complete that Veller could hear the hum of the holographic projectors, the subtle whisper of the environmental systems, the rapid pulse of her own circulatory organs. 17 seconds in which 4,000 cycles of certainty collapsed. Emergency recess, Veller announced, her voice carrying none of its usual authority. Council members will reconvene in 1 hour. Commander Chen, maintain your position. The human's hologram flickered. Of course, High Arbiter were not going anywhere. The projection vanished, leaving the assembled delegates staring at empty space where impossible mathematics had hung moments before. Drath was the first to break. This is a trick, an elaborate bluff, they cannot possibly have. My analysts have been reviewing their calculations for the past 9 minutes. Mariseth interrupted, her melodic voice shaking. The economic models they're flawless. Every variable accounts for behaviors we didn't realize we had. Trade patterns we thought were random. Political pressures we assumed were invisible. She looked up, her eyes wide. They've been watching us, measuring us for cycles. How long, Veller asked. Based on the depth of their data. At least 20 cycles, possibly longer. They've observed every council enforcement action since first contact. They've cataloged our responses, mapped our decision trees, reduced our entire governmental structure to predictable patterns. Coordinator Theex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. Maldo High Arbiter. I forwarded the tactical projections to Fleet Commander Zarvok. His response is concerning. Show me. The message appeared in Velsher's neural interface. The humans have identified weaknesses in our formation I was unaware existed. Their fire solution calculations are more accurate than our own tactical computers. Respectfully request clarification on rules of engagement before proceeding. A fleet commander requesting clarification. That alone was unprecedented. We need to verify these scenarios. Belshara said, run our own simulations. Counselor Dath, your species has the most advanced military modeling systems. Can you confirm or deny their projections? Draw Keth's crest had faded to a dull gray, the color of uncertainty. It will take time. Their scenario matrix is extensive, but High Arbiter, and even if their calculations are only partially accurate, he trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. Then we cannot proceed with Stage 5 Myrith finished, not without knowing the true cost. Valera's 6 eyes closed briefly. The consequence protocol had never failed because no species had ever called their bluff. But the humans weren't bluffing. They had done something far more devastating. They had shown their work. There's another concern, Theexa added quietly. The humans transmitted their full scenario matrix on an open frequency. Low power but detectable to anyone monitoring Sector 447 Theta. Who's monitoring, Veller asked, though she already suspected the answer. 17 independent observer ships. The Neutral Trading Consortium has 3 vessels at the sector boundary. The Independent Worlds Alliance has dispatched a diplomatic courier, and the paused. Reports indicate that 12 council member species have forwarded the human data to their home governments for independent analysis. The situation was metastasizing. What had been a simple enforcement action was becoming a galactic spectacle, with humanity's mathematics spreading through the political ecosystem like a virus of certainty. Recommend we negotiate. Mira said the humans haven't actually harmed anyone. They've simply demonstrated that they understand the stakes better than we do. Negotiate. Drath's crest flared weakly. They violated our space. They defied our authority. If we negotiate now, and every species in the galaxy will see it as weakness. Every species in the galaxy is currently reading 18,000 pages of mathematical proof that we might be weaker than we thought, Mirith countered. Our choice is between negotiating from a position of strength we're not certain we have, or escalating into a conflict our own analysts can't predict the outcome of. Shara opened her eyes. The decision settled on her with the weight of historical consequence. Reconvene the council, asterisk. I want every military analyst, every economic advisor, every political strategist we have reviewing the human calculations. We have 1 hour to determine if their mathematics is accurate. She already knew what they would find. Aboard the human vessel, Commander Chen sat calmly in her chair watching the probability updates scroll across her display. Council's broken into emergency session. Lieutenant Morrison reported encrypted communications spiking across all channels. They're panicking, not panicking, Chen corrected. Recalculating. There's a difference. Commander Park looked up from his station. Current odds on Council proceeding to Stage 5, down to 17%. Stage 6 is at 4%. Stage 7 is statistically negligible. Chen allowed herself a small smile. They're smart enough to do the math once they've seen it. What if they decide our math is wrong? Morrison asked. What if they escalate anyway? Then we proceed to contingency theta. Chen's voice remained level. We've calculated that scenario too. It's expensive but survivable. Oh, though I'd prefer to avoid it because of the casualties. Because of the waste, Chen gestured at the fleet surrounding them. Zero warships representing trillions of work hours, vast industrial capacity, and the collective security of 47 species. Destroying them serves no purpose. We gain nothing. They lose too much. The mathematics only work if both sides can be made to see that cooperation yields higher returns than conflict. Park shook his head slowly. You really think you can reduce peace and war to equations? War has always been mathematics, Chen replied. Logistics, casualties, resource expenditure, industrial capacity. The only difference is that most species let emotion override the calculation. Fear makes them overestimate threats. Pride makes them underestimate costs. Anger makes them ignore losing scenarios. And humans don't. We still feel those things. We're not machines. Chen's expression softened slightly, but we've learned to calculate first, feel second. It's not always comfortable, but it keeps us alive. A new alert chimed. Morrison checked it, then looked up in surprise. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Council. They're requesting negotiation talks direct channel. High Arbiter Veller wishes to speak with you privately. Chen nodded unsurprised. Patch her through and Lieutenant, start preparing Scenario 651, the negotiated settlement. You already calculated this outcome with 83% confidence. The Council is logical once they see the numbers. And we showed them very convincing numbers. Veller's hologram appeared in the small briefing room adjacent to the bridge. The High Arbiter looked tired. Her 6 eyes dimmed, her posture less rigid than during the public session. Commander Chen, she said without preamble, your calculations, my analysts confirm, they are disturbingly accurate. I appreciate the verification, High Arbiter. This changes things. You must understand that the Council has maintained peace through predictable consequences, through fear. If other species realize that these consequences can be calculated, can be prepared for. Belshara's voice carried something that might have been exhaustion. You've undermined the foundation of galactic order. No, Chen said gently. We've exposed a weakness in your foundation. There's a difference. Audited your system worked because no one questioned it. But any system built on unquestioned assumptions is vulnerable. We simply asked the question you hoped no one would ask. What if we did the math? And now that question cannot be unasked. No, Chen agreed. It can't. But that's not necessarily bad. A peace built on fear of consequences is fragile. A peace built on understanding of consequences is stronger, more stable, more honest. Belshara's eyes studied her. You speak of peace, yet you violated our space, defied our warnings, forced this confrontation. We forced this conversation. Chen corrected. There's a difference. High Arbiter humanity has watched the Council for 23 cycles. We've seen how you maintain order. We've calculated the long-term sustainability of your model, and we've determined that it will fail within the next 200 cycles with or without our interference. That's impossible. It's mathematics. Chen pulled up a new model when she hadn't shown the full Council. Your system works perfectly for external threats and primitive species, but you're increasingly dealing with sophisticated civilizations who have time to study you, to learn your patterns, to calculate optimal responses. Eventually, someone would do what we did. We simply did it first and did it in a way that minimizes casualties. The model showed fracture lines in the Council's authority stress points that would emerge over centuries as more species reach technological and analytical sophistication. You're not threatening us, Veller said slowly. You're warning us. We're offering you data, Chen replied. What you do with it is your choice. But High Orbiter, we violated your space for a reason. We knew you would respond with consequence protocol. We calculated every stage, and we prepared this conversation because she paused, choosing her words carefully, because humanity wants to be part of the galactic community. But we want to be part of it as partners, not subjects. And the only way to demonstrate that was to show you that we understand the system as well as you do. Silence stretched between them. What do you want? Filchera asked finally. Negotiation. Real negotiation, not capitulation. A seat at the table where decisions are made, not just where they're announced. In a galaxy where consequences are calculated. Or not just feared. You want us to change the way we've governed for 4,000 cycles. I want you to evolve before entropy forces you to. Chen's expression remained calm. High Arbiter, we can spend the next 6 months fighting, devastating both sides, and proving that our mathematics was correct, or we can spend the next 6 months designing a better system together. Shara stared at her for a long moment. Then something remarkable happened. The High Arbiter laughed. A sound that Chen had calculated had a 12% probability of occurring. You calculated this conversation too, didn't you? Down to a 74% confidence on your response patterns, Chen admitted, though your laugh was unexpected. That's going to require model revision. Good, Valara said, her six eyes brightening slightly. It's reassuring to know we can still surprise you. Hi, Arbiter. I hope you always do. Predictability is useful for mathematics, but terrible for relationships. Shara nodded slowly. Very well, Commander Chen. I will bring your proposal to the Council. No promises, but I will present it fairly. That's all we ask. And High Arbiter, one more thing. Yes. Thank you for doing the math instead of the war. That scenario was survivable but expensive. I'm glad we don't have to run it. The hologram faded, leaving Chen alone with her calculations and the distant stars beyond the hall. Outside, 1,100 warships held position waiting. Inside, humanity held its breath, calculating. The council reconvened 6 hours later. Valshara stood at the central podium, her six eyes scanning the assembled delegates, and every one of them had spent those 6 hours reviewing the human calculations. Every one of them had seen the mathematics of their own potential destruction laid out with clinical precision. Every one of them had been forced to confront a truth they had never considered, that consequences only worked when the other side cared more about fear than probability. The humans have presented us with a choice, Belshara began. We can proceed with enforcement protocols accepting the calculated costs, or we can negotiate a new framework, one where humanity participates as an equal partner rather than an observed species. Equal, Drath's voice had lost its edge. His crest remained dull gray. High Arbiter, they have one ship, one vessel against our thousands. How can they claim equality? Because equality is not measured in ships. Hamza Counselor Ashara pulled up the human scenario matrix, letting it dominate the chamber. It is measured in capability, and the humans have demonstrated a capability we did not know existed. The ability to reduce galactic politics to pure mathematics, to calculate consequences with greater accuracy than we can impose them. Mireth rose, her voice careful. My species has completed independent analysis of the human projections. We found 3 errors in their calculations. She paused. All 3 errors were in our favor. They underestimated their own advantages and overestimated our strengths. The humans weren't trying to intimidate us with worst-case scenarios. They were being conservative. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. My military analysts reached the same conclusion, added Counselor Theva. Oh, in several scenarios where we achieved tactical victory, they calculated our casualties as 15% lower than our own model's project. They gave us the benefit of the doubt repeatedly. Shara nodded. She had noticed that too. The humans could have presented nightmare scenarios that would have paralyzed the council with fear. Instead, they had shown realistic assessments that invited verification rather than demanded belief. They are not trying to conquer us, Velshara said quietly. They are trying to make us think. To what end, Drath asked. What does humanity gain from this display? Recognition, Velshara replied. Not through force, not through fear, but through demonstration of intellectual parity. They want us to see them as peers and High Arbiter. She looked at each council member in turn. They have succeeded. The vote took 47 minutes. 17 species voted to continue enforcement protocols. 30 voted to negotiate. 3 abstained. The consequence protocol was rescinded for the first time in 4,000 cycles. Commander Chen received the transmission at 0847 hours ship time. The Council extends formal invitation for diplomatic negotiations. The message read, Provisional status upgrade to associate member pending treaty ratification. Commander Chen is invited to address the full council at her earliest convenience. Morrison let out a breath he'd been holding for hours. We did it. They backed down. They didn't back down. Chen corrected, reviewing the probability updates scrolling across her screen. They recalculated. There's a difference. Backing down implies defeat. Recalculation implies wisdom. Semantics, ma'am. No, Lieutenant? Precision. Chen stood, straightening her uniform. If we treat this as their defeat, we create resentment. If we treat it as their wisdom, we create partnership. The mathematics of the next 100 cycles depend on how we frame this moment. Park looked up from his console. You calculated the framing too. Everything after this point is contingent on perception management. We have to make the council look smart for negotiating, not weak for yielding. Otherwise, the political fractures we predicted become self-fulfilling prophecies. Chen walked to the viewport, looking out at the vast sphere of warships surrounding her vessel. Slowly, incrementally, they were beginning to disperse. Not in defeat, not in retreat, but in reconfiguration of military formation, transforming into an honor guard. They're learning, she said softly. That's the most important calculation of all. Not whether they can destroy us, but whether they can adapt to us. And if they couldn't, Morrison asked if they'd chosen stage 5. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then we would have proceeded to contingency theta. 43% casualties on our side, devastating losses on theirs, economic collapse across 17 systems, political fragmentation lasting generations. She turned from the viewport, and I would have carried that math with me for the rest of my life. Every number representing someone who died because we forced a confrontation we knew would turn violent. But it didn't. No, it didn't. Because the council, for all their arrogance and for all their rigid doctrine, they were smart enough to do the math when it was presented clearly enough. That's why we spent 3 years building those models. That's why we showed every calculation. That's why we gave them the respect of transparency. Chen's expression softened slightly. Fear is fast. Mathematics is slow. But mathematics lasts. 2 weeks later, Commander Chen stood before the full Galactic Council, not as a hologram, not as a threat, but as humanity's first representative to an assembly that had governed the galaxy longer than her species had been spacefaring. The chamber was full. 47 species, hundreds of delegates, and via neural broadcast, billions of observers across the galaxy. They had all seen the scenario matrix. They had all watched humanity reduce the galaxy's most powerful government to equations and probabilities. They were all waiting to see what humanity would do with that power. Honored Council, Chen began. 2 weeks ago, my vessel violated your territorial boundaries. We knew the consequences. We calculated them. And we proceeded anyway, because we needed you to see us, truly see us as something other than primitives, to be observed or subjects to be managed. She gestured, and a new display materialized, not scenarios of war, but projections of cooperation. We have calculated 847 conflict paths between humanity and the Council. But we have also calculated 2,317 cooperation paths, trade agreements that benefit both parties, technology exchanges that advance both civilizations, security partnerships that protect both territories, scientific collaborations that expand our understanding of the universe. The numbers hung in the air, each one backed by the same mathematical rigor that had predicted the Council's response to their incursion. The mathematics of conflict are simple, Chen continued. Someone wins, someone loses. Resources are destroyed, lives are ended. The calculations are brutal but straightforward. She paused, looking across the assembled delegates. The mathematics of cooperation are complex. Variables multiply. Outcomes branch in unexpected directions. Innovations emerge from synthesis. The calculations take longer, require more effort, demand more trust. Her voice carried across the chamber, but the returns are exponentially higher. Vilshara watched from the high arbiter's position, or her 6 eyes bright with attention. Around her, the council delegates leaned forward, drawn by the same precision that had alarmed them weeks ago, now applied to possibility instead of threat. Humanity asked for partnership, Chen said, not dominance, not submission. Partnership. We will contribute what we calculate best. Analytical frameworks, predictive modeling, long-term strategic planning. We will learn from what you do best. Cultural synthesis, diplomatic precedent, institutional memory spanning millennia. Together, we can build something the galaxy has never seen. A cooperative framework based not on fear of consequences, but on understanding of possibilities. Not on what we can threaten each other with, but on what we can create together. She made a final gesture, and the projection showed a single probability, 94.7%. That is the calculated success rate of a council that includes humanity as a full partner over a 500-cycle timeline. Compare it to the 62% success rate of your current model over the same period. Chen's expression remained neutral, professional. The choice, as always, is yours, but the mathematics are clear. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then Vilshara rose. The council votes now, all in favor of humanity's admission as a full member species. 38 votes in favor, 5 opposed, 4 abstentions. Humanity had become the 48th member of the Galactic Council. Not through conquest, not through fear, but through mathematics. 6 months later, in a small briefing room aboard a council diplomatic station, Commander Chen reviewed the quarterly reports with her staff. Trade agreements are performing above projections, Morrison reported. Council species are actually requesting our economic modeling services. The Mulvaran want us to calculate their expansion scenarios. The Zenthar are asking for military optimization analysis. They're learning to trust the math park observed. Even Drath's Empire has requested consultation on their industrial planning. Chen nodded, scanning the data. Everything proceeding within expected parameters. The Council was adapting, evolving, incorporating human analytical methods into their governance structure. In another 3 years, the integration would be complete enough that the galaxy would function more efficiently than ever in its history. Ma'am Morrison said hesitantly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When we entered Sector 447, Theta A, you said we calculated an 83% confidence that negotiations would succeed. What about the other 17%? What if the Council had been too proud to recalculate? What if they'd escalated to total war?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up a file from her personal storage one that had never been transmitted, never been shown to the Council. "Contingency Omega," she said softly. "The scenario where we lose, where humanity is set back centuries, where thousands die in a war we couldn't prevent." The file showed casualty projections, economic devastation, technological regression. "I carried this calculation every day we waited for the Council's response. Every human who might die, every family that might be destroyed, every future that might be erased. But you proceeded anyway because the alternative was worse." Chen closed the file. "If we didn't force the conversation, the Council's system would have eventually failed catastrophically within 200 cycles. Millions would have died in the chaos. Multiple civilizations might have collapsed. We calculated that too." She looked at her officers. "Sometimes the ethical choice isn't the safe choice. It's the choice that minimizes total suffering across all probable futures." "That's a hell of a weight to carry," Park said quietly. "Yes," Chen agreed, "but someone has to carry it. Someone has to do the math that no one else wants to do. Someone has to calculate the cost of action versus the cost of inaction and then make the decision knowing that people might die either way." She stood on closing the reports. Outside the viewport, ships from 30 different species moved in coordinated patterns. Council vessels and human ships working in partnership, guided by calculations that accounted for everyone's needs. The Council believed we would fear consequences. Chen said they were wrong. "We don't fear consequences, we calculate them. We map every outcome count, every cost, and then we choose the path that leads to the best possible future for the most possible people." She looked out at the stars. "That's not courage. That's not bravery. It's just mathematics. Cold, precise, unforgiving mathematics. And love," Morrison added quietly. Chen turned surprised. "It's love too, isn't it?" he continued. "You calculated all those deaths, all those scenarios, all those, well, because you love humanity enough to save us from the futures where we die. The Council just didn't understand that you can love someone and still be willing to lose them if the math says it's necessary." Chen smiled, a rare expression that transformed her usually neutral features. "Lieutenant Morrison, you just described the most human thing about us. We feel everything: fear, love, anger, hope. We feel it all as deeply as any species in the galaxy." She turned back to the viewport. "We just don't let it make our decisions for us." In the distance, a Council transport docked at the station, carrying delegates from 6 species coming to consult with the Human Analytical Division, coming to learn how to calculate instead of threaten, coming to understand that consequences were not weapons to be feared, but variables to be optimized. The age of fear was ending. The age of mathematics had begun, and humanity, with its cold equations and warm hearts, stood at the center of a galaxy learning to count the cost of every choice and to choose wisely. What do you think about this clash between alien arrogance and human power? Share your thoughts below. And remember to like and subscribe for more HFY stories.